Everyone, of course, I did introduce to you earlier my guests, my panelists, as we delve into the conversations of what's happening in and around the country. Of course, the last week and the other week, we were talking about the protests that were happening in Kenya and the Gen Zs and how much, zeal they managed to put up, and they did raid even the parliament. It started as a very subtle demonstration, which was very peaceful, and it later on turned extremely chaotic. Over 30 people have been reported dead in those demonstrations that did come through. And of course, they addressed a presser in which they did highlight what they expected from their president. And one of the expectations was, Mr. President, just wake up and fire the entire cabinet and restructure your entire government. Well, for many people, they thought, okay, this is unheard of, and many did not expect that it would be happening. But to the surprise or no surprise of some or many, yesterday the president addressed a televised meeting and said he had fired the cabinet, all the cabinet secretaries out. I think we served out with the Foreign Affairs Minister, Attorney General fired. And so what is the next government going to look like? But as for many of my panelists, was this expected? What's the pressure behind? Could it only be attributed to the demonstrations which were against the tax amendments that had come through in Parliament? Because as is, Kenya has a deficit of about 2.7 billion shillings, and that accommodates about 4.6% of their gross domestic product that is missing out, and that is a portion of what was expected to be paid through with the tax amendments that were being suggested. But after those demonstrations, it was very clear that President, His Excellency Ruto, would go against it and say, I am withholding these particular ones here. And now we are seeing these changes. I know someone out there is saying, they're firing a cabinet here, we have a retreat in Chankwanze. But anyway, let me get it from my panelists right here on what they actually think about this. I'll start with Joseph. I would like to know from you, first of all, was this something expected? Yes, the Gen Zs came through and asked that something like this should happen. Did you see this coming? And can we only but attribute it to the demonstrations that did happen with the Gen Zs?
I think in my entire journalism career, I have never read a man so wrong like I have read William Samoei Ruto.
This time.
I made a wrong call that he would not be president in a race against Raila. He beat me to it. I also made a wrong call that he's such a hard guy that he would not make concessions like that. He has beaten me to it. So I want to admit that it's quite a surprise that William Samoei Arap Ruto would wake up and fire an entire cabinet. In that cabinet are some of the people who have been the pinnacle of his rise to the presidency. Aden Duale was with him from the Orange Democratic Movement. He actually, in his earlier interviews, he said the day William Ruto will become president, then he can retire from president, a loyal and trusted. Most of those actually came from his days in the ODM when he was the deputy party leader. Aisha Jumwa abandoned Raila. She was one of the most fierce defenders of Raila Odinga, abandoned Raila and went with Ruto. And then most of the cabinet secretaries were people, party leaders who supported his presidential bid. Moses Kuria, Musalia Mudavadi, the only survivor in that cabinet, and all that. So I think that I am watching two things. One, that picture of Raila Odinga, Ali Hassan Joho, and Gladys Wanga on one side, and Ruto, Rigathi Gachagua, and Musalia on one side, could be a pointer of what's to come. That's if Raila can bite the bullet. But I saw the reaction of the Gen Zs to his calls for dialogue. He has been the political chameleon of Kenya. He has always reinvented himself at every election since 1997. Maybe that's why they call him the enigma. But I want to admit that I was extremely surprised by Ruto's action. I still think there are faces in that cabinet that will make a comeback to the next. But also, there's a possibility of other political formations that were previously in the opposition finding one or two slots in government. The other thing is that moving forward, he has set the pace for so many concessions. And I want to monitor how he's going to run the state with all those concessions and with the realization of the Gen Zs that actually you can make demands and they happen. So I think it would be interesting to watch it. But again, Mildred, I was checking again yesterday. This is not something new. When President Mwai Kibaki lost in the referendum in 2005, when there was a fierce conversation about the constitution and he was beaten, he fired his entire cabinet. Not only that, he also suspended parliament. So maybe as Ugandans, we are very shocked because these things are not heard of here.
Yeah.
So we are wowed. But in 2005, he fired President Kibaki fired the entire cabinet and left only Mudi Awori, the vice president. William Samoei Ruto had served in that government. He had been member of parliament for Eldoret North because when they combined to take on President Uhuru Kenyatta in the 2002 elections, he had been part of the people who worked with the president. No, actually that time I think he was running mate to Uhuru Kenyatta. He was with Uhuru Kenyatta. But I'm saying that, look, probably the spirits of Emilio Mwai Kibaki visited him and said, look, young brother, these things can be done. Okay. And Kenya has moved on before, okay, when an entire cabinet has been fired. And probably people have been asking the questions, what do ministers do? Do countries need ministers? Because for about 2 or 3 weeks when Kibaki fired that cabinet, the state ran. The government never died. Okay. And Kenya is still here. It never got extinct.
All right. Thank you very much. Kenneth, is there more than meets the eye? For many on the surface, and like Joseph said, for many on the surface, it looks like, or it is the demonstrations, or it is the demands that are coming in from the Gen Zs. But is there more than what we could actually be able to imagine? Because it all stems from the manner of the election, how it was won. I mean, the Electoral Commission staff are having issues here. Some are saying we will not announce. Others are saying we're going to announce. And there is just a 200,000 majority. It started with protests where we did see Raila Odinga as well coming through. But now it seemed to have settled, and it is as though Ruto is having a good time, and then boom, there is another protest coming through, and we are seeing this coming. Is that more than meets the eye for you?
Well, for me, I think for Ruto, it's a cocktail of so many things. And like you said, it stems way back from the election time and the fact that some people have actually been suggesting that he did not win the elections outrightly. And therefore, there's been a belief that there are two power bases in Kenya calling the shots. It also suggests that probably there's been a lot of bickering inside the cabinet. Not so long ago, like 2 days ago, I was reading a story where the Attorney General was actually complaining and saying that Ruto does not consult him when making certain decisions. But we have also had the Deputy President himself taking a certain hardline position against what Ruto has been saying. So for me, even inside cabinet, there's been lack of a streamlined process or operation, lack of coordination or that spirit of actually working together. But then also it brings in the aspect of the Gen Z, the new generation. And for me, I'll be interested so much to see where will they find themselves in the new broad-based government that Dr. Ruto has been talking about. And of course, the fact that Raila Odinga and the other opposition leaders have actually been addressing the media and also supporting the position taken by the Gen Z clearly indicates that somehow, somewhere, there's a role they are playing behind these young people in the backseat. So for me, it's a continuous sort of evolution of the Kenyan politics. But like Joseph said, one of the things that also shocked me is the fact that Ruto gave in to some of these demands. Well, for starters, when the demonstrations had become rowdy and the young people were becoming so dangerous, I thought at that point it was right for him to make the announcement that he made initially, including withdrawing the financial bill. And I thought that was it, and probably there were going to be mechanisms to address some of the issues that were coming through. But to this point where he announces that he's disbanding his cabinet and looking for a broad-based government. Broad-based government simply means there's a likelihood people on the other side, people have different views, being incorporated into this particular new set of government. So we are likely to see some opposition figures in that particular cabinet. I don't agree with Joseph that some of these people may actually bounce back, because if you've been fired right now and then reappointed, and I think this will just fuel the protests more, because if the young people are saying that the entire cabinet must go and the government reorganized, if you follow what Ruto actually said, he said he will be consulting widely in private and publicly to come up with a broad-based government that will help to address a number of issues. Two things that I saw sticking out: the issue of debt, the fact that Kenya has a huge debt problem, and the fact that they need to raise local revenues, how do they deal with that? Then he also said the challenge of corruption, which means there's also that huge challenge of corruption there, and probably they were not seeing in the same direction with the people with whom he was working with in cabinet. So for me, it will be interesting to see what kind of direction and how that government will be actually constituted. Are we likely to see young people in that setup taking the lead because they are the ones that have pushed for these changes? Or are we finally going to see Raila and his group once again getting that opportunity to get back into power, which for me I think is a little bit unfair, you know. Anyway, one would say that one of the biggest problems in Africa is the politics of winner takes it all.
Yeah.
But you know, if you went in a race, contested with people, and behind the back they are not accepting that you are actually the winner, but at the same time you're trying to support their initiatives to take them to a certain level. And for me, I find it rather very problematic. The only difference between Kenya and Uganda is the fact that the institutions of the state will stay aside and see how things are going, and probably that will be it. The only good news that I will talk about from Kenya this week is the fact that all the sides agreed on the need to reconstitute the Independent and Boundaries Electoral Commission. And we saw Raila Odinga and the group, we saw Ruto and the group, and for me, projecting a semblance of cooperation and a deep sense of wanting Kenya to go to a next level, even when elections are quite still far compared to where we are.
All right, thank you very much. Charity, did you see this coming? And what do you make of the decision that William Ruto has made against the demands that had come through during the demonstrations?
So, of course, certainly you have mentioned that when the demonstrations started, it didn't look like anything was going to come out of those demonstrations. And Ruto seemed very firm where he was. But I want to think that this whole thing is bigger than Kenya itself. The forces that have happened in Kenya and what we eventually see Ruto now firing his cabinet are forces that are beyond Kenya. And the forces include those of NATO. As soon as Ruto took the first private jet to the US, Kenyans said, why did you take a private jet? Why didn't you take Kenya Airlines? And he said, no, it was cheaper to take a private jet than to take Kenya Airlines. They produced the money he had spent on a private jet. And they said, we cannot have a president who is costing us this much when we are wallowing in poverty. And you see, the question of institutions, which Ken talks about, does play a big role for Kenya all the time. That they have an army that defends the people. They have a police that defends the people. The parliament was no longer defending the people because it was more about individual aggrandizement. Everybody was eating. Yeah? That is what was happening. Corruption was in there. And that's why you see when the Gen Zs entered, they said, we even have the mess, the symbol of power inside parliament. We have it. It's us who are in charge now. You're no longer in charge because you are always filling those big bellies of yours with food, money, everything, and you leave us here in our own poverty.
You
so
went even in the cafeteria and enjoyed it.
The broad thing is, if you read what Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote when Ruto had just returned and he had been with President Biden and they had agreed on setting up the NATO in Kenya, wa Thiong'o wrote and said, look, you're selling our country while we watch you sell our country, and that we will not allow as a people. People criticized Ngugi and said, Ngugi, first deal with your family. You're a small family there, your wife, what issues, what? First deal with that before you come to the public scene to tell us what you're telling us. But for me, those were already pockets of what was happening within Kenya. And that the general feeling from the public was that Ruto seemed hell-bent on pleasing the West than pleasing his own people that had put him into power. And so, of course, setting up a NATO base within Kenya has its own implications on the region. And you have regional political players who you do not think were sleeping. The last meetings that were held by heads of states in Kenya, we also had our own president go for that meeting in Kenya before he chaired the AU meeting online. He did not go this time. And while he was in Kenya, as much as he had conversations with Ruto, he had conversations with Raila. Who knows what was in the conversations with Raila? And what was the reading on the political scene? We already have tensions in Congo between Rwanda and Congo. Then we have a NATO force coming to Kenya. Why is the United States interested in setting up a NATO force in Kenya? And of course, the local.
And the president of Kenya outrightly siding with Israel.
Yes,
in the war against Palestine.
Yeah. So you see so many external forces that had to work their way internally. Then comes the killer financial bill. And the killer financial bill comes again on the back of looking like we are bringing reforms which the IMF and World Bank would love to see happening in Kenya than than what the ordinary Kenyan would like to see in their own country. So we have things like airtime going to be taxed, and essential goods, they're going to increase prices on essential goods. You can do that in Uganda and get away with it. You can actually do it any day. You can come here and say a loaf of bread is now 12,000. Nobody will touch you because Uganda has its own different history. And our history somehow holds us back from so many things that we can't do. But for the Kenyans, they will protest. And we have said they have institutions that give them the room to. By the time the 39 died, and we saw a bit of tear gas, and then the ones that were shot, and those images of young people dead all over social media. Notice, social media was not even switched off. If it was
police was giving the protesters some water for the tear gas. They were sharing with fellow Kenyans.
In Uganda, would you ever see such a thing happening? Yeah. Where is it also possible that we would stay with the internet if that was happening? People are killed like that and gross images are running across the internet. Is it also possible that the internet would keep on? It wouldn't. But in Kenya, this all happened, and on the globe, we knew what was happening. So there's a lot of external pressure. Ruto finds himself isolated. He cannot be supported by the people with whom he sat because they are also running for presidential office. Right now, Biden is campaigning for return into office. So the United States is busy with its own election. And so Ruto has no external backing, which he thought he got right from the time when he won that election. So that said, it's quite interesting that finally he begins to think with himself. He said, after strong and deep reflections. What were those deep reflections about? Really, these deep reflections are saying, I am now on an island. I am there by myself. The foreign forces, yes, they might have pushed me, and I have some reforms that I have suggested. The people have rejected them. The institutions are there. I have tried to shift a number of things. He tried to shift around his army, the people in the army, remember the one who just died and the way he died, the circumstances, the chopper, and then the stories that came after that chopper. And for me, I think that I began to sense tension. I saw Ruto going to get all this pressure when that helicopter crash happened and the stories that ensued after that. Okay. Now, so he was between a rock and a hard place.
And just had to do this.
And just had to fire his whole cabinet. Okay. And after all, being that it's not the first time it happened,
there is a precedent.
Yeah. So Kenya can still survive and Kenya will survive.
Someone is saying, I think we should shift the geographies of some 256, 251. I know you're thinking out loud out there, but Derek, did you see this happening? And as it's been clearly put out, there's a precedent. So clearly, for William to be able to take this, His Excellency William Ruto to be able to take these stance, he had seen something that had happened before. But would you also entirely and solely target to the demonstrations of the Gen Zs and the demands that came thereafter? Or there is more than just that?
The politics of Kenya have always surprised everyone. In my view, there is always an equation that has to be solved after an election, and that equation is Raila Odinga. Of course, from the 2007 election up to today, all the subsequent elections have always had Raila having a bargain in every of those cabinets. And he has served through all of them. What does that show? He is always the de facto president, like they call him, the president of the streets, or the president of the people, so to say. And I feel even now, this whole conundrum that's happening in Kenya can only be solved when that factor is solved. And we might not see it, we might not see him on the streets or whatever, but the forces behind and the forces that are happening, everything that's happening seem to be around him. And Ruto has a very uphill task, because when you win an election with such a very small margin, it means you are always going to serve on your tenterhooks. It means you don't have the majority. You have a very slim majority of the people. The people who are against you, who did not vote for you, are equally many. So when they rise up, it's so fundamental that so many things are going to change about you that you will have to take very drastic decisions. And the decisions that he's taking right now are not because probably he's not a good leader. He has been in all those governments that have been in Kenya. For me, it's just the force that kingpin, the Raila factor. And if Raila right now is instituted into government,
do you think he would budge to a coalition?
I think he will, and I feel it's what he's looking for. That's what I'm thinking. It's what he's looking for. And the people of Kenya have seen all the things happening, and they've risen up to say, well,
actually, he thinks he should be the president.
You know?
And that he said from the very day the election.
And that is why I'm asking if you think he would budge, because if I believe I'm number one, I don't want to be number two. I don't want to be somewhere in between.
He is always looking for that card. From 2007, I mean, we've seen all the precedents, and he has set them. Ruto has one reason, has only one solution: bring him in. And when you bring Raila in, then you've solved the entire problem, because then there is a majority. I
want to be with Joseph. No.
It is well. I am going to give you the time. Joseph has been nodding in disagreement.
Yes.
And these are facts.
Okay.
These are facts. Because we've seen them. We've seen Raila.
You'll be buying time.
Of course. So you are looking at a Raila who wants to be number one.
Yeah.
But then you don't have the mandate because the people did not elect you. Okay, they elected him and everyone has been
But
saying...
you lost by 200,000.
Just that is what makes Ruto be on the tenterhooks he's on right now. Losing by that, winning by that very slim margin is the factor in the politics of Kenya right now. And for me, every decision that Ruto is taking right now is not from his head.
It has a Raila in
it. It has everything to do with Raila. And Raila is always going to bargain for something in government every other time.
Okay.
And that has been, Gachagua was talking about the same. Immediately after elections, was asking tough questions. Why is it that you always have to come and bargain for something after an election? And for me, that is what's disturbing Kenya. The moment that is solved now, everything is going to
I think it's what's disturbing. Like Charity did, I think it was Kenneth, and he just read my mind that, is it the problem of the politics of winner takes it all that we need to be rethinking in Africa? But that's a conversation we'll have at a later stage. When President Ruto says a broad-based government, how would this get to look like? And how is it going to actually be able to calm down the tension and allay the fears of the Kenyans on how the government is being run? Let's get back with that conversation when we do return from the break. Welcome back. We are back on air. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back on air. Welcome back and thank you so much. Wow. What we had over during the break. But of course, we continue with the conversation. I still do have Derek Wandera with me. I have Joseph Sabiti, Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, and Charity Ahimbisiwe Kalebo. As we went to the break, we were looking at the decision by President William Ruto to fire his cabinet and what that actually means. But we want now to get into his statement of he is looking at a broad-based government. And what does this sacking mean? Is it to say now Kenyans can officially say that he is a hearing president and that the issues that they were talking about, the ills of the cabinet, will be coming to one end? And what should or what will the next cabinet look like? Kenneth, I want to start with you.
First, even before I get into that, one of the things that I've not followed closely is whether the Gen Z are an organized group. Well, they are an organized group given the manner in which they have been able to mobilize the country and push for the concessions that have actually been given in. But I'm just trying to imagine if they formed themselves into a political vehicle, a political movement that actually provides the alternative, because as young people, they have sprung up and indicated that they so much understand the affairs of the state. If you look at how they dissected the finance bill and the things they were actually saying, and some of the proposals they were putting forward, and the force that they have used actually to push Ruto in the corner, I would want to see them organizing themselves into a political vehicle, some sort of an organized group that prepares to usher in actually a new political dispensation in Kenya. Because now, at the moment, we have the old guard who seem to be still bickering about the past. You know, you have Uhuru Kenyatta in the background with his family interests. And of course, some people have actually been saying that family is not happy because of some decisions which Ruto took, including withdrawing security guards from Mama Ngina and attempting to carry out some sort of land reforms that would do a sort of touch on the huge pieces of land that family clearly controls. And therefore, you see that family still has a say. You look at the family of Raila Odinga and their historical role in the affairs of Kenya. So for me, I think at a certain stage, Kenya has to sort of leave these gentlemen behind, leave the Uhuru Kenyatta and their family behind. The other side, the Gideon Mois are silent. I don't know what is happening that side. But also the Raila, actually they should think about somehow, if Kenya needs to move to the next step, beyond us celebrating them for the gains they make in elections and things like that, I think Raila, Uhuru, the Kenyan young people should actually provide the next generation of leaders, and they should organize themselves beyond these protests, because the world is moving into that direction, and you need to have what some people call .com leaders, people who understand the challenges that they face today, and they are able to use innovations to address some of the financial issues that the country faces. But now, this broad-based government, like I had already stated, we are likely to see some people from the opposition there. We are likely to see some people from the civil society who have been vocal. But also, I'm thinking maybe we are likely even to see a lean cabinet, because in terms of reorganization, I heard there Ruto talking about issues to do with duplication, wastage that has been caused by duplication within government. So in terms of restructuring, I'm looking at probably a more slim cabinet, more reduced government departments and mergers. Probably mergers are going to occur. So a broad-based government simply means, look, we are so many, we all control a certain level of following in this country, and therefore I, as Ruto, I have failed to run this country alone, so I'm requesting you kindly, or I'm bowing down, please come on the table, and we govern the state called Kenya. And for me, what worries me most is when we reach that time of elections, what will be happening? Are we likely to see these people again going two different directions and giving us the same politics that we have seen? And that's why for me I'm saying the Gen Z guys need to be accommodated in this government, but it's also time for them to actually occupy that political space, organize thoroughly, have leaders from within, and provide leadership to Kenya, beyond just organizing the protests.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Joseph, you totally seem to disagree when Derek was saying, I think looks like Raila Odinga actually wants to be part of that, and probably expecting in the next broad-based government, as he could be actually accommodated. Why do you disagree? But also, what do you look at this next government looking like? What are the options for Ruto to allay the fears of the Kenyans and calm down the tensions?
I think that for the first time in a really long time, Raila Odinga is him. Raila the person, Raila the institution, and Raila the politician faces an existential threat for the first time in his political career. There was a say in Kenya that Baba is always right. What Baba has said, we do. The last time I was covering elections, and someone said on camera, if Baba tells us to jump in the lake, we don't ask why we jump, because Baba knows. There was that, you know, the Raila Odingaism had entered Kenya, eaten it and penetrated it. When this protest started, I took note of what the young people were saying.
Yeah.
And when he went and met President Ruto, they said, you are all, the problem is now together. We're going to retire you together. They are even saying, look, our president is the Busia Senator Omtata. Others are saying our president is Matiang'i, Fred Matiang'i. They forgot. Just the other day, he was shooting them on the streets. So the conversation for the first time has gone beyond Ruto and Raila. The people are looking beyond. And also, it has never happened in Kenya that there are demonstrations in the backyard of a sitting president. The Kenya's politics has been so tribal that even the most poor person in Eldoret now would be defending Ruto. But you saw the images on the streets of Eldoret. You saw the images in Western Gishu, President William Ruto's home county. You saw people in central Kenya. In central Kenya, a child is born, and one of the things they are taught is to hate Raila Odinga. They have a collective hate against him. Mount Kenya is the reason Raila never became president. Yes. When every corner of the country had accepted him, Mount Kenya refused. And that is why he has not been president. But there were demonstrations in Nyeri. So in his analysis, my uncle here from Busia forgets one thing, that there is there is a retired president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, somewhere, whose farm was raided, and allegedly by cabinet ministers, some of the sacked.
Yeah.
They went, the famous quote, the infamous one they used, that they urinated at the mother's farm in Ichaweri. They raided his farm, took his sheep, they went to his businesses, hit them, you know. They withdrew security from Mama Ngina. Now, in the politics of Kenya, it has never been imaginable that Mama Ngina would be touched. She has held a sacred place. When in a few years ago, Babu Owino called the Uhuru Kenyatta mtoto wa mbwa, the whole country went in uproar. Like, how dare you insult? The sacredness in which they held Mzee Jomo has been carried by Mama Ngina. President William Ruto has tried to show that, you know, times have changed, you and your dynasty arrangement. But you see, these families have controlled business, have controlled the affairs of the country for the last over 60 years. It is weird that you think you can wake up and dismantle it in 2 years. It's not going to happen. I said here that when President William Ruto took charge, he literally dismembered the civil service. He dismembered the intelligence services. He dismembered the Directorate of Public Prosecution. There's a new DPP. There's a new director of DCI, of intelligence. All the 13, and the deputy president spoke about it and said you cannot transfer 13 assistant directors from intelligence services and 13 directors at a go, you know. So I think that he was so aggrieved during the last election that the vengeance, the viciousness with which he came has affected his judgment.
Okay.
You go back and listen to the proceedings of the National Assembly when they were approving the appointed ministers. And I remember one quote from John Mbadi. He's a nominated member of parliament. He said, we either reject all these people or we give Ruto his skunk. He said in that cabinet, they are incompetent, they are unqualified, and they have integrity issues. He said except 7 or 8, the rest are a skunk. So let us give Ruto his skunk. He said, I know these people have no capacity to run government. You look at you just go through them one by one. Moses Kuria, his 2 AM tweets when he has tested the bitter liquid. One of Ruto's most trusted lieutenants, Kipchumba Murkomen, his only legacy probably is the expensive watch he was wearing and the designer boots. Professor Kithure Kindiki, from a respected professor of law to giving orders that has, and by the way, we are celebrating the security forces in Kenya, but people are being kidnapped. There are young people who are missing. There are people who are shot dead, you know. So the president is projecting progress on one side, but behind the scenes,
there's something different
there's
happening.
something different happening. So
Okay.
Raila Amolo Odinga, the person, will not join government. There's a possibility that he can second trusted lieutenants into that cabinet, but the person of Raila will not walk into that cabinet. His eye is on the African Union championship, chairmanship. But you see, Derek, when politicians come out and say, we have met and discussed IEBC, please look for what they have not said.
Yeah, what's behind the unwritten?
One of the things that I have learned is that if you want to test whether you're sick, whether you have malaria or not, begin to see whether you're trusting a politician. It's the most risky thing to do.
Thank you, Joseph. I'll come to you, Derek. Let me.
We shall
Derek,
not
let me
comment.
come to you. He's telling us Yoris has malaria.
And the way he hobnobs with the politician,
malaria
he's actually a politician himself.
His malaria must be plus. He doesn't work with politicians.
His malaria must be AAA+.
Must it be A?
Derek, let me come to you on what do you think this actually broad-based cabinet will look like, and moving forward for Kenya, what's going to be the glue for President William Ruto to stay calm?
It's absolute that the broad-based government has to accommodate the interests of the people.
How do you define the people?
The Gen Zs, they have spoken.
Who are the Gen Zs?
The people of Kenya.
Derek, you have your time.
Yes.
I will give Joseph time to rebut if
The
he
people
wants
of Kenya have spoken, just like the president said. They've spoken and he has listened.
Yeah.
So when you bow to that pressure, you will certainly do everything and dance to the tunes of the people of Kenya. and my nephew, my nephew here is trying to ask me who are the people. He knows them. He knows who the people are, and he knows who is representing the people in that kind of situation. I am going to certainly think the way Ken is thinking, that you're certainly going to have very many people from the opposition occupying some of those positions, because the names have been coming out during these protests, and they have been suggesting this one and that and stuff. I think we needed to have listened to the people of Kenya more when these protests started. To me, I don't think this is coming from nowhere. It's not coming from it's not dropping from heaven. There has been a systematic arrangement that certainly there are people who feel they should have occupied these positions in government. And by virtue of the fact that they are not, then there is always going to be a problem. Agree with me, there are so many voices that are not speaking but are louder than these that are speaking right now in Kenya. Even if you say Raila is looking at the AU chairmanship and stuff, I know that there is a lot that he is saying that is being spoken that he's not saying as a person. Have we ever witnessed any government in Kenya that Raila is not part of?
2013, 2017, 2013, 2017, 2017, 2022.
There is not being physically present, but
yes,
maybe that's what we are
speaking. So there is certainly interest
that you have your persons in, like you were saying, Joseph,
and
that
he is going to.
He will.
I am sure he will be happy. Probably he will be happy to be maybe prime minister. You get, because of the crowd that he pulled in the last election. He feels he should be part of this, and he should be president. Actually,
yes, he feels he should be prime minister or something.
He feels he should be president, but also if you give him a fundamental position, he will be happy
shoot for the moon. If you fail, you fall among the
you're like, yes, let me settle for this.
Okay.
If he doesn't, even what my nephew is saying, Joseph, that probably he will not come as a person, but he will front so many people who are going to be part of the cabinet. And for me, when the interests of Raila are served, Kenya is going to be at peace. And that's what I think, and that's what has been the issue always.
Okay. Charity, what does this broad-based government look like for you? And probably how long do you think it will take?
So Kenya has had many times it is said it's going to have broad-based governments. I think even Uhuru tried to have one. This one of Ruto is not going to be any different. It's going to have a lot of opposition, like all my friends are saying here. But I think some of the faces that he has fired will certainly come back. I just hope he doesn't bring back the two most arrogant ministers that he had in there that kept rubbing it off the young people, like whatever you're saying doesn't matter. You know, we will do what we want to do because we are already.
But that was Ruto's sentiments at the start of the protests.
Those were his sentiments, but they were being propelled by these two most arrogant cabinet members. And I think they are the ground for which the Gen Z said, you must fire this whole cabinet. But what is interesting, which I thought as he sets his broad-based government, these Gen Zs had messages. Who was giving them these messages? Do you think those children just woke up one day and they understood all these political stories and could analyze perfectly, very well, the financial bill, the $2.6 billion, what it means, the breaking down? Who was giving these people messages constantly, regularly, very well written out, very well crafted? You know, one of them was produced in court. But that one, for him, I don't even think they gave him a message. I think it was just being, himself, because he stood and he said, look, I will fight until Kenyans get justice. And the judge kept saying, no, we just wanted you to respond as to whether you're guilty for the charge that has been read for you. Are you guilty or not guilty? Because that is plea taking. During plea taking, you're supposed to say you're guilty, not guilty, or you were pardoned, whatever plea you're going to take. He didn't want to take plea. He said, I don't care what it is that is going on here. For me, I just want to tell you that I was part of the revolution because, one, I believe in the revolution. Two, I don't believe that Kenyans should be oppressed. Ruto and his government were oppressing ordinary Kenyans. They made promises to us. None of those promises came to pass. Now they're even coming to tax the little businesses that we run. Everything that we seem to stand for is going. So if it means that I fight, if it means I rot in jail, I will rot in jail. And the judge kept saying, no, I just want you to plead. He kept rapping and he said, even you're under, what did he said? You're under, like when you're under oppression, yes.
Under duress?
Yeah, you're under captivity. Of the Western world. You're running their own court system. Agenda. So you're here in court telling me, plead or don't plead. And that for once I felt the alternative dispute resolution mechanism would have worked better for these issues to do with the Gen Zs than the formal court system. Because when you listen to him, he just wanted to speak, and he was speaking from his heart. But when we look at that government and that cabinet, as he begins to set it up, and he says he's going to also declare a number of other reforms, I hope he doesn't suspend Parliament like his friend did. But even if he did, these Gen Zs already went inside and said, we're already in charge of...
We have the speaker's mess.
We have the speaker's mess. They already said they're in charge. So if he suspends that Parliament, it will not also surprise me. But because for Kenya, what is happening right now is that anything can happen from a political point of view. I cannot even put it past Raila that if they gave him something which he thinks for him he wants, one is an old man. Even if he came back the next time, he's wasted. Kenyans are saying, you've served your time. There's nothing new. You're not going to bring a new message. So he's now looking out for his own interests. That's what politicians do. Politicians 100% look out for their own interests. Yeah. These governors that he always establishes and puts there as piper boys for him, they give him budgets. They give him money. So any one time, Raila can be in that cabinet. I cannot put it past him.
The only point where I disagree with Charity is the suggestion that there must be a certain group of people who are sort of shaping the narrative of the Gen Z. Now, this is a reality in many African countries, even Uganda here. Don't be surprised when you go on the street and you're being taken around by a boda guy who is a graduate from Makerere. Very many people have invested into education, gone to school, and the use of technology, mobile phones, AI, and people are capable of understanding the challenges that their countries are facing.
They actually understand the challenges.
They understand the
challenges.
And the fact that this man was able to stand in court and insist on the narrative was a clear signal to you that there is a certain message he's trying to send and trying to tell these people that enough is enough. So I think the Kenyan youth, just like Ugandan youth and in other African countries, they have gone to school, they are educated, they understand the things. What they lack are just opportunities and even spaces to be able to contribute to the governance of their countries.
But Kenneth, that said, I still think that...
In just a few seconds, we need to take a break. Yes.
Oh, okay. I still think that there is a force behind. I don't think this Uhuru Kenyatta is sleeping. Because if you notice, as soon as these Gen Zs were dead, he's the one who came out with a statement, a very quick statement. Oh, no, you should listen to them, not kill them. Why are you killing them? Why was he coming? Who else came out with a statement?
Maybe it was just by a coincidence.
It just can't be a coincidence. So there are certain things that you must know.
Uhuru came up with a statement, but Raila actually did a press conference.
There must be, yes, so there is a force. There are forces that always work.
There is no smoke without fire.
Yes, exactly.
You don't need to go and rally all the Gen Zs.
Yes,
you
pick a few.
A core team of 100. radicalize them.
Yes.
Give them the message.
Yes.
There's already unemployment, there's already poverty.
Yes.
That is
It
the
rhymes
fodder.
with
And
what
that's
is
That
going
is the
on.
fodder that you light.
Exactly.
It doesn't take away the fact that there was a planning, an organization.
There
for
is a
buying this.
planning,
It is
there is
never
an
coincidence.
organization.
All right,
There
we will
is
be
a
taking
way
a very
that
short
was
break. While we're
happening.
talking about disbanded cabinets, our cabinet is still standing, yes, and there is a cabinet retreat actually that has been taking place in Changkwanzi. So let's come back home. Charity begins at home. We'll have that conversation when we do return. Thank you so much for keeping it NBS Television. It's the Morning Breeze, your most authoritative morning current affairs show. Welcome back from the short commercial break as we get to conclude the conversations. We're talking cabinets in context of two countries, what's happening in Kenya and in Uganda. We are having a cabinet retreat, and the permanent secretaries as well having a cabinet, a retreat to be able to strategize, to be able to speak about how the country does get to move. The last time the president did what many had expected to be a cabinet reshuffle, he actually made a few changes. Yeah, he made a few changes and did announce them. And some have already started anticipating and speculating probably now a real shakeup of the cabinet coming through. Let me start with Derek. I know that you've covered several of these retreats in Changkwanzi. What strategic advantage would such a conversation bring forth for a country like Uganda?
I'm
And what do you expect coming out of this cabinet retreat?
I am very, I always feel very, very low whenever these people
You are
go to
skeptic.
Chang. Yeah. Because in most cases, most of the stories that I've covered coming from there normally have always ended up into, we've gone to negotiate about this budget here and there, and then they get there and they disagree in one way or the other. Before you know, they are sharing a few notes here and there. You remember the 40 million for the MPs that they shared in Parliament? I know my nephew is going to disagree with me. That money,
Why are you debating in anticipation? Our rules don't
that
allow
money,
debate
that
in
money started from there in Changkwanzi. They had gone for a retreat, discussing about the budget and supplementary, and someone was supposed to receive a supplementary. People were saying you're not supposed to receive it, and then at the end of the day, he just said, "Okay, I will give you some, but allow me to take the supplementary," and that's where it came from. So covering those retreats has always been like heartbreak for me. What is going to come out of there is going to be very heartbreaking for Ugandans.
Okay.
And I do not actually expect anything very good from there, because it's always almost a monologue. You have president coming to speak his mind, and these other people who come, who have the opportunity to speak crying for the president for their personal interests. I don't think the Changkwanzi retreats are for Uganda. They have always been for their own interests as NRM and the people who have gone there. They've never been like, let's go sit and think for Ugandans and strategize for Ugandans. How do we push Uganda forward? No, it's about how am I making myself better? How am I getting some bigger budgets to my office and things like that. So it's so heartbreaking that whenever these people go for these retreats, the stories that come out of there are always a mess for the country.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm looking at Charity nodding through, and I'm thinking, when they
She's
talk
smiling.
patriotism,
I've enjoyed
there are
Derek.
people who need to get into the patriotism classes. But thank you so much. You're entitled to
Charity
your
is
opinion.
smiling very
That was
badly,
just
very
tongue in
I've
cheek.
enjoyed Derek so much. I don't know.
Joseph, the cabinet retreat is here, and we are awaiting a lot of conversation coming through. What's your own take of what you expect to be coming in from there?
Mildred, cabinet retreat or no cabinet retreat, the country faces fundamental
It's
issues.
rare Joseph answers a question by first calling my name. It is welcome.
He wants to be. He wants to be.
Continue, Joseph.
He's trying to. You are going to hide your feelings, your true
Joseph
feelings,
has
Joseph.
malaria. Leave
Joseph, you have malaria.
I plead that my rights to call
You're
your name are
protected.
respected.
You're protected, Joseph.
Joseph
Go
has
ahead.
malaria.
I am saying
Joseph said it.
the country faces fundamental challenges.
Yeah.
even with the road networks with the rains not there, the road network in the country, in the countryside, in a lot of places is doing bad. That means the farmers are not doing well. Our health sector has challenges. There are all these issues. I think that at the core of the conversation is even the cost of public administration. We were talking about Kenya, a cabinet of 22, a better economy than us. They have the capacity, they could have even hired 250 ministers. First, that room shouldn't be that congested. And these are my personal views. That room shouldn't be that congested. That when the cabinet meets, it shouldn't be an entire conference hall to host the cabinet. I think that as a country, we must have conversations around reducing the size of that cabinet, looking at the cost of public administration, and debating those issues. So I understand Derek's frustration. I have covered Chankwanzi a couple of times. We have quarreled together in the Costa. But you see, you're not going to stop the cabinet from having a retreat. They are the one you have, they are the one you're going to work with, unless something else happens. That is the cabinet the country has. The country has to move on, and they have a mandate to deliver. Remember, they made promises to the country in the last elections, and they're under obligation to.
Do they ever deliver those promises?
That's another debate, but I'm saying the obligation, the duty is to them. So when they meet, they must meet. Do they have a choice? They must meet and they must work. But I think that is also important that views like Derek's, that question, the necessity of those retreats, are actually respected. I don't know why Kenneth is pointing at the Honorable Dombo.
There are actually two people, Honorable Dombo.
I saw your hand.
Honorable Dombo and Chris Yomosi. When I saw those two moving together.
I know what you're going to say.
What am I going to say?
I know.
I remember
from their days in the
I remember their days in Parliament.
No, in the Parliamentary Commission.
I remember their days in Parliament, but not only the Parliamentary Commission. I remember the issues around the late Serena Nevanda. That's what
I knew why you're
I remember the troubles that they went through and how they are dressed smartly in yellow there and marching around.
There's a picture.
What do you make of that retreat, by the way?
Let me pick it up from there. You know, a retreat. What does retreating actually mean in actual sense?
You're going to sit,
it's an opportunity of going to sit. First of all, do deep reflection on whether you're making progress and implementing the issues that you're supposed to do, and then come out suddenly with a paradigm shift, better ways of actually doing things. And I don't think it's likely to happen in Uganda, unfortunately. Sorry, it's not going to happen. I don't see any deep reflection there apart from one man telling them when they came in 1986 what they have been able to do and what he thinks he wants this country to be. That's it. Because in that group I don't see any people who can stand up to challenge the position taken by that one man and to tell him that, Your Excellency, Mr. President, on this particular issue, we are not heading in the right direction. Do you know why? Because most of those people are not in the position where they should actually be. You have people who are gambling in offices. I don't want to mention names, but you look at the cabinet and you wonder what this person is actually doing. They are
fishermen.
What that person is actually doing in that particular position.
Yeah, they are fishermen. And they are fishing.
Please, can we respect the fishermen?
Let's reflect backwards and see. Please. There's one time when there was a similar retreat.
But you can't be saying they're incompetent, because if they are appointed and there is a parliamentary committee that vets and agrees, that means that their competences have actually been tested. Warranted.
Did you attend the appointments committee meeting?
Of course, it's an in-camera.
It's an in-camera, so you do not know the concessions and the reasons why some people are actually being approved in those particular.
But but
let me say this.
Can Parliament refuse?
There was a time when there was almost a similar retreat, and there were cabinet directives which were issued. How many were there? There were 25. Tell me how many have been actually actualized. How many have we delivered on? Among them was zero tolerance to corruption. Corruption is the talk of town. It has actually gotten deeper to the extent that
the president has just appointed a new anti-corruption unit for URA.
And he's going to make another.
There have been anti-corruption units around before. We have had institutions, the IG, we have had CID police, we have had DPP, but the cases have kept going on. And to the shock of many, corruption is actually becoming deeper, to the extent that the president himself accepts that there's trouble, that people within his government
And he has always
conniving.
accepted.
And
But the president
Very many years ago,
appointed a
he has
corrupt
already-
man.
Very many years ago, he went to Rwanda and said there are very many thieves in the president has been candid about
He
that.
has accepted.
Yes.
Yeah,
Since about 15 years ago?
Yeah.
He has lamented, just like many Ugandans have. And for me, from Changwanzi, we will just continue with the same lamentations. I think I won't be surprised if at the end of this retreat, people will be shouting, no change, no change, no change, because
yes.
that's what has always come out of Changwanzi.
Charity, as we get to conclude this, who heads patriotism in somewhere, UPDF or whatever docket it is?
General Masiko.
I think we have some candidates, General Masiko, on this on this panel. But Charity, over to you. When such a retreat happens, like Kenneth says, it is expected to be a position of reflection and strategic advancement of where are we and where are we actually headed, because it's just a few more years to end this tenure, and the government has to account for them to give another one for the people of Uganda to give them the mandate.
You know, I have kept looking at you
I
like that
know.
with a big smile, and you're wondering what's going on. You know, if I was in a court, I would actually say nothing useful to add, Your Honor, because these guys have done a very good job. And I think I enjoyed Derek, and I've enjoyed Kenneth a lot, Joseph as well. I think one thing they have said is that Changwanzi has become a monologue. That stood out for me. Monologue.
Become or has always been?
It is always a monologue. Always.
Derek said has become a monologue. I wish it was a soliloquy. I love the soliloquy because at least a soliloquy, you sit down and think through yourself. So it is an internal reflection of yourself. But the other one, you're always expecting what you're getting back. But on a broad scale of things, there's nothing new going to come out of Changwanzi. For them, they go there for holiday on taxpayers' money. They tell us about corruption. If you read Francis Mbuga is one of the good writers you'll find from Kenya. He does harp the very things that Karl Marx talked about. Classes, the top class, the middle, and the lumpens. And that these lumpens will have to be kept in that lumpenic position. Lumpenic has been my own creation. I have added it on to Karl Marx. And they are kept there by the top class and this middle class. How? By ensuring that if there is corruption, it is a patronage. It is systemic. That us who are eating, you don't just come from down there to join us up here. There is a whole scyrand of things that you have to go through, you know? Mbuga says it is slippery, that the ground from the lumpens to the middle is a slippery ground, and you don't know how to permeate that ground. I want you to reflect on these things as a Ugandan, that, you know, it's not going to change. We've seen these things written in the books. Sadly, you're talking about corruption. It's not also going to go away from 1986, when the president took power. He has been fighting corruption. And his statements,
How has he been fighting?
The Honorable Akena said he has been fighting it verbally. The way I have told you, Karl Marx, that is how the president has fought this corruption. Honorable Akena says he likes the following lines, and I agree 100%. I'll crush them. I'll finish them. I will.
Those are pigs. They will go to hell. They will go to hell.
Locked up. And I know the thieves. He always knows the thieves. They are the cowards. They are the RDCs. They are the procurement officers. They are...
You have forgotten one. Akasaja Kachaina. Akasaja Kachaina vakabye.
So Mildred, Mildred, how better do you want?
Thank you, Charity. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Derek. That's all for the Media Roundtable. Good morning. God bless you.